Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who, sagacious as he is, still gets lost in his garden sometimes.
Tim Longo. When he said that, I thought to myself, well, if I were hosting, I'd probably find a way to use that. So yeah, good.
We've been doing this a while. You know me so well at this point. The other one I really seriously considered. I have to go look at the exact quote is. Oh yes, a man who is better with the ladies, I'm sure.
Yeah,
that was the other one I considered very strongly. So,
yeah,
a lot of good lines.
The lines are something else, yeah, for sure. Yep.
So this past week we ended up playing all through Chapter 3, but I actually basically replayed the whole game because replayed from the beginning because I started from my PlayStation 4 save. And I will say it's easier on PlayStation 4. It's an easier game. I think.
Is it
early
just the
on,
controller or what?
I think it is mostly. It's not the controller. I think the controls are a little more forgiving, a little bit better than.
Oh, because
of how they're tuned, because of turn rates and aiming.
The special edition or the remaster.
Remaster, yeah. I feel like they have done some work on it. There's also something different. I think there might be something different about ammo. I feel like there's more explicitly. The Punisher used, I thought, TMP ammo in the GameCube version. I might be wrong about that. I might have just misread what I was seeing. It's possible I'm totally wrong about that. But I felt like I got the Punisher. I was like, cool, 9mm gun. I've got tons of 9mm ammo because I've got 2 boxes of TMP ammo, which is the sort of burst fire. Automatic.
Yeah, so, the Uzi essentially, or submachine gun is what it is.
Submachine gun, yeah. I might be wrong about that because it's definitely not the case in the PS4 version. I bought another weapon, the Red 9, because somebody had written in and said that that's the best versatility. And I ended up selling it because I was using the Punisher way more, and I ended up preferring the Punisher TMP are my two main go-tos.
Interesting. Okay. Now I kept the Red 9. I put the stock on it as suggested. I think that was one of the Zachs who suggested that, right?
It was. It was Zach. Zach who wrote in 2 weeks in a row to answer our question. Yeah. Oh, and that was actually he didn't write in this week, but we did have a question outstanding last week. Was whether there are more enemies in the world.
I figured that out, by the way.
Oh,
I figured out. Yeah. I'm an idiot. So the scoreboard that I'm seeing, at least in the special edition, that's the total enemies for the whole game so far. And then the chart, so it just keeps going up.
Oh, okay.
And then how many?
Though, if you go other places than the main path, there are more enemies there. There's a lot of wolves and stuff that show up in places.
So if you backtrack, you mean?
If you backtrack, right? So I went.
Because you can't leave the castle, right?
No, once you're to the castle, I think you're done with the town. So I'll never be able to go back and get because I was trying to get a lot more done.
You never get to go back.
I don't think so, but maybe. I mean, maybe possibly.
So that one, that's that one treasure I missed. Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly don't remember. I don't feel like you do, but I get this one confused with 5, obviously. So I'm already like, isn't there that big battle in the? No, that's Wesker. Stop. So I get those things confused, but I don't know. I will say though that it's definitely, it feels a lot more forgiving. I did that tram first go. No problem. Easy even.
Agreed.
And so I was like, yeah, this is just tuned a little different. They're not throwing as many scythes or, sickles or whatever they're throwing. And, it just, was easy, really. And it's like it did it. I was like, wow, this was this is the way this should feel. So
Yeah,
I got down to the bottom.
Should be a set piece. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
like a grinder. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was good. It was good.
And
I'm glad I switched because I think if that difficulty, had continued to have spiky bits like that, it would have been a tough ask to get me through the whole game. So it was worth the investment to go spend whatever 3 hours to catch up with last week's stuff, and then another 3 hours maybe.
Yeah, you played a lot then.
Yeah, well, I didn't have our D&D game last night, so I had a Sunday basically free. I didn't have to do any prep or play or anything like that, so it was nice.
Yeah.
It was good timing for that. So.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I think it is going to pay off for you to, and you're playing on normal, I assume, or whatever. So yeah, I think I'm wondering too, to your point about ammo in general, like, it's not, I don't know if it's, it's a little bit of the Zelda, like drop what you need to some degree. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I don't know what the rules are, but I'm wondering if also like what enemies are dropping ammo wise is a little more generous on the remaster version, if they tune those numbers some or something. Yeah. Because I definitely run out if I'm pretty just carefree with what I'm shooting when. But I feel like I remember in the previous versions I played, or at least in the GameCube version, that ammo was a lot more scarce. But that's just a vague memory.
It didn't feel that way to me playing as far as I did in it. I actually felt like, wow, this is a lot more generous with ammo than I thought. And then playing the PS4 version, I actually ran out of ammo in the town. And had to run and find a place where I was basically in a shed, and they would come to me, and I just knife them to death as they came in through the door.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so it was a totally different feeling. True. Yeah. Totally different feeling for me. And then, although up to that point, I was like, man, I got a ton of ammo. And then in that battle, I basically used it all. I'm like, oh man, I don't have any ammo. So it was interesting how different that felt. Because on the GameCube, it felt a little more even. So I don't know what's going on there, or if it's just the tuning is just stranger in different ways, or if it's just like a dynamic thing that just kind of happened to me. It just happened this time that the numbers fell a certain way, and there was more money dropped or whatever, and there just wasn't a lot of ammo, and you can never know with that stuff.
Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, I'd be curious about that too. Now I think about it, maybe I'm generally paranoid about, especially in Resident Evil games with resources, ammunition resources, and so I am doing a lot of like I said, I think in the previous episodes, shooting them in the knee and then knifing them to death. So I do conserve a lot. So maybe it's just
that's been helping me too. I actually, and we'll have an email later that kind of talks a little bit about this, but I've actually been a lot more thoughtful about trying to do more of that. I definitely was very run and gun for a long time, and now I'm definitely placing my shots. If I have the opportunity, going up and knifing somebody who's down, etc., kicking if I can get in close and things like that.
So there's also a suplex, which I forgot about. If you get them in a stun state, have you done that yet?
Oh, I've not.
Yeah, if you, it's unfortunately, I feel like the messaging, the feedback on it isn't great on sort of like which state they're in, because they can go down, but if you hit them in the leg and they kind of go to both knees and they sort of are hovering there for a second, not that they don't fall all the way down on their back, but they're kind of on both knees for a second, that's sort of like a quote unquote stun state. And if you go up to them, you can hit the action button, the super action button, and he'll do this awesome suplex where he takes them and suplexes them over his head and then does major damage. I think that's an instant kill. So, but it's a little bit tricky to orchestrate, because I feel like the animations are not clear, at least with the guys in the monk robes.
I can imagine that would be tougher. We should probably start talking about sort of the way the game escalates. I will say, I did appreciate the eyeball, although I don't think that's how a retinal scanner works. So since they read via heat, the blood vessels in the eye, they don't, anyway.
Well, maybe it was a specialized one for him or something.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. It's like, seeing a fingerprint scanner in a James Bond movie, and then he just turns it around and puts it up to the screen, and you're like, but now it's not the finger, it's flipped. That doesn't.
That's funny you mentioned James Bond, because I did see the new one, and there is a eyeball situation there that is pretty good that you'll see someday. So for anyone who's seen it, they'll know what I mean. Nice. But good James Bond stuff.
I will. I'll keep an eye out. As did Mendez. So yeah, I did play the Mendez battle, which I really liked. Maybe I'll use that as sort of the entry to one of the things I really appreciated playing this week, which was Mendez is the first creature, when he sort of bursts and fully evolves, or whatever's going on with them is fully taken over by his parasite, and he breaks out into this like elongated, 10-foot tall. He's already tall, and now he's even taller because his spine just totally elongates. And then he has like these splayed wings at the back. When he first emerges like that, he actually has the shape that is on, that's
the
their
religious symbol.
That's their religious symbol, and it looks like it's pretty good. Like a stylized version. It's very nice.
I didn't notice that. Yeah, but that's a neat touch.
It's a really cool touch. And then it's like, oh, well, this is why that's their symbol, because this is what they turn into. And you're going to learn, more about that, I'm sure, as we go, because it's underneath the castle in these caverns. I guess that's where we're going to go probably next week. But the thing that I really appreciated sort of paying attention to that stuff this time with the parasitical creatures themselves is there seems to be a number of different stages of the parasite. There's the ones the villagers have, which, they sort of, well, first of all, they're obedient. But then the second thing is the ones that spring out of the neck are kind of these whipping, writhing, spinning around really quick. In this section, we come to like a more evolved version of that the monks have, that are like fuller and more controlled and do a massive amount of damage to you if they get close. They can instant kill me at times.
Yeah, no, I think they do. It's like, the more evolved, yeah.
And then there's those sort of detached that show up in the sewers that we'll get to. Well,
it's like they're growing. Like is it the fact that like if you let them keep growing, then they turn into those invisible guys?
That was my thinking, that those are, it felt like there's an ecology at play of the parasite itself, that the parasite was like, you can sort of see how that would happen in a development sense, right? Somebody's sketching out, like, here's what the parasite could look like. Well, how do we change it? It's like, well, we could, fatten it up, and we could, maybe they can come separate. And, like you can totally see as a developer, just like, oh, this is what they do. And here's like this really terrifying version. We can make it a boss and, whatever. And you just sort of see, that is a very natural. It's
like Alien, right? Evolution. Like the face hugger to the chest burster to the big alien, all the different soldier, life cycle. Yeah. Soldier, queen. Yeah. So that's a great point.
You even see the virus like almost as the face hugger when it's in the vial or whatever, the syringe. It's like a little face hugger in there. It looks like a creature, not like a virus, right? It's not like the T virus. Right. It's specifically a creature that's going to go in and, I assume, attach itself to your brainstem or something, considering where it bursts out of you. Anyway, I loved seeing those evolutions this week.
Yeah. It's a very thoughtful approach. What was oh man, brain melting. I had a point about Alien, I think. But
I stomped on you. I'm sorry.
No.
About the evolutions from the face hugger to the, on and on to the queen.
Yeah, no, it's gone. It wasn't you. But anyway, yeah, it is. I do appreciate that. Oh, that's what I was going to say is I feel like, so there's one note that you find in the castle someplace that talks about what the parasite does to different. Do you remember reading that one? There's right, if it infects a bird, if it infects a dog or whatever, right? And so I assume we'll fight some bird thing at that point. Now that I'm thinking about it, but
well, wasn't it talking about different
types
different
of
parasites?
different types of parasites? Yeah, right. It wasn't about this parasite.
It wasn't about
was
this
sort of,
parasite. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was sort of like a little bit, because Alien does the same thing, right? Like, depending on what the face hugger attaches to, it can take on different properties of the entity, which they do introduce in 3, I think. But the thing about Resident Evil 1 is like there didn't feel like there wasn't really a continuity of any kind, right? Like you have the hunters, which have nothing to do with zombies, you know, they're just monsters, and then you have giant critters and stuff, and then you have zombies,
spiders and snakes and whatever. It's like, why are these like?
Yeah, it's just sort of like a haunted house, right? It's like just sort of like best of horror tropes or something. But this one, and then I think my memory of 5 is that they continue with 5, because I think in 5 it's sort of like the black oily kind of thing is happening, and like all the creatures are sort of based on, other than I think they burst into like black oily kind of stuff, and there's a continuity there. I don't think it's the parasite in 5. I think it's back to the T virus, but they've unified it. So 4, I feel like 4 was sort of the fork in the road for them of at least thinking things through a little bit. And the cool thing about this game too, to your point, is that the location itself is very, like, it feels like a very cohesive setting. You know what I mean? Because it's like, well, so far at least, I don't know where it ends, but it just feels like, yes, this is all sort of like, this is all sort of a watertight sort of community that has this whole thing happening, right? It's like you've gone out into the mountains, and there's this cult, and they're developing this whole thing, and it feels like, it feels very cohesive in that way as well. It's a very good sense of place, which I really always appreciate.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You're sort of progressing through this village, which has some sort of natural sort of variants of sorts of places in it. You've got the lake, and then there's some places on the other side of the lake. So you sort of see this, and can't be that big of a lake because it's all one sort of continuous town. It feels like, more or less. But you can sort of see that. I mean, we've all been to lakes that have vacation properties or whatever, and they feel like they are kind of one big community that's kind of sparse, right? And it sort of feels that way. And then, naturally it leads literally up a hill to a castle, right? Which is, up higher and looking down on the village and all of that. And I mean, I think it feels really great. I mean, and lots of different things are incorporated in that. There's a central area that's much more dense in terms of buildings, and that's where the church and the town center are. There's no mini mall or anything, but that's where people gather, clearly. And then another church kind of up on the hill that feels like an older place. And then, I mean, it all is
feels like it could be a real place. Yeah. It feels like,
except maybe that bridge that leads down from the church. I'm like, I don't know if anybody would walk on this every day, jumping over these holes, but okay. Sure. Maybe.
Oh, you mean that leads to the lake?
Yeah, that leads down. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That feels a little like.
Well, there's plenty of. There's plenty of. Yeah, and then the tram. Yeah, the tram doesn't really go. It goes to that one building, I guess. But but it also kind of, I guess it sort of has a feel of. It has a feel of a place that used to be a place that is now, deteriorated and become this horror show, and like the tram was there back in the days when people used to, I don't know, ski or something.
Or maybe it took them down to a mine or something like that, and it's separate from the town and that, or quarry back there. I mean, you can sort of imagine. You kind of go into that building that feels like a support where you fight Mendez, which feels like a support building in that way. Like this is a place where this feels like there's lots of tools and stuff around, that maybe.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So it's gestures at being motivated. I think it's reasonable.
Better than I would have thought.
I don't think it would make a good ski area. I think is what I'm saying. It's very rocky. This is not a place I'd want to, rocky.
Fair enough.
Good skiing there.
Yeah.
A lot more snow. Anyway.
Yeah, that
elevated because there's this lake besides. But anyway.
Well, the other thing I was going to mention with your sort of ecosystem point, that they've given us one glimpse of um who's the main dude. That's not Salazar's the little
I
guy,
mean,
right?
Sadler. Yeah,
Sadler.
Salazar is the Napoleon.
Sadler, when Sadler kills Luis, he
Yeah,
shows his colors.
monstrousness.
Yeah,
Yes.
and his staff also is very, very cosmic horror-y, you know. It's got like
Yeah,
eyeballs and it's like pulsating and looking around at you and stuff. And so you know, like you can kind of see that there's probably going to be some ultimate reveal
final form,
of
of these
him,
things.
yeah,
Yeah,
of him being like the apex predator of it all or something. The, you know, essentially the alien queen or something
right,
like that.
right.
So
Yeah,
so
that's
so
true.
you
I'd forgotten to incorporate that in because he's also, that feels very insectoid. Also, like all of these things feel
yeah
the way they move and the way they're segmented and things like that, which are nice choices, for the tech of the time to make them like, more, I don't know, low poly, basically. I mean, that they could be done with fewer polys,
right.
is also a good choice. But insects make a lot of sense for that, as well. So,
Well, and then Salazar, when you first entered, or I think most of the times you see him, he has these two guys flanking him with side by side or side on the side of him with robes on that look to be the insects in a
right.
robe, which is
Yeah.
also like some nice foreshadowing, you know, and
Yeah.
but so it sort of shows that they kind of have, I don't know, some sense of intelligence, or I don't know, or a sense of self, or where he can kind of control them, but they can put robes on. I don't know, it's
Yeah.
just very weird. And then when you see them, they're very animalistic, of course, but
Yeah.
but
Do you have to does he have to dress them every day? Does he have to work
yeah,
have to mind control them to put their clothes on? It's a fair question that I don't think this game is necessarily going to address. But but it is, I mean, it does look totally insectoid under there. Like at a glance, it sort of looks like they're just skulls, and then you realize, oh no, that's two like things coming
mandibles,
down and joining
yeah.
that are mandibles. Oh, it's great creature design, and in those robes, it makes it super creepy.
Well,
So
and they show you just enough. I think that's one
yeah,
thing that the series kind of ebbs and flows on this, but I think that in this game so far, I feel like that they've done a good job at you know introducing enemies, introducing characters, introducing stuff just enough, and foreshadowing things.
yeah,
There's definitely some ham-fisted stuff here and there, but
yeah, and it's good restraint, really.
fair,
I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the introduction in the prison section of the blind guy, and sort of like how that all starts, and then you assume just like the El Gigantos or whatever, that you'll meet him again, which you do. But yeah, so you made it to the castle. We went through. We both went through all of basically chapter 3, because I think our next chapter is 4.
Yes, we reached the end of chapter 3. So it was 4 sub chapters. So
yeah,
it's good stuff.
So Salazar is the 20-year-old child that
looks child sized, but he looks like he has. I think there's an actual. A specific real world disease that he may be suffering from. It's like the Benjamin Button type thing,
yeah.
He looks like, I mean, that just has that sense to me. I don't know if it's acknowledged or if it just was an inspiration or what have you. But he looks that way to me.
He's quite a character. He's quite a character. Yeah, they've done a good job. And just like you mentioned it last episode, but there's sort of that Lord Fauntleroy little kind of feel to him, where it's just like, I don't. It's like something in the bloodline is not right over the years, and the castle theme in general is very much about the family, right, and about the sort of like the royalty of them and taking advantage. I feel like there's a couple notes where they talk about how they use the villagers and stuff, and it's obviously very one thing I like about the castle is how much it contrasts the village, right? You get this sense of opulence coming from this family that's corrupted or whatever, right? And you're seeing sort of their skeletons in their closet or what have you, and And so that's been neat. And, you know, though a lot of it is just sheer sort of level design logic, there are some, you know, there's sewers, which you'd assume, there's a garden, there's a prison, you know, so there's sort of a bit of sense of place in the castle too. The I guess I'll call the bathhouse, that section was quite where you do the defense. And then there's just an onslaught of enemies that come through as well. I mean, talk about an economical use of space. It's like
right before the defense section. Yeah. Actually, I felt like I remember the first time I had a lot of trouble with that section as well when I originally played it, and I thought, oh, I'm really glad. I remembered immediately why, and that was that they'll grab her, and if you just kind of come in and stay near the front door, that's a bad idea, because if they grab her, they just go straight through the door and you lose, right? They get away with her.
Okay. I didn't
so you really need to, I had happened to me and I was like, oh, that's right. You know, this is a room. You don't actually have to move a ton, but you do have to move some, and especially away from the exit, because that can just kind of happen, you know, because they can come from three directions. So you really want to kind of be in a corner, you know, and then kind of moving up and, you know, getting some space, you know, between you and guys coming from
I moved around a lot
behind to the left. Oh yeah. Yeah. I
really
really appreciated it this time, actually. You know, I think I probably run less than you do overall, it sounds like, in terms of getting new positions.
Maybe.
But
I move around a lot just because I basically try to take advantage of their speed and their sort of AI, I guess, their dumbness or their slowness to react, I think. So seems to help. But
yeah, so I would just kind of position myself in the corner, take out a whole bunch. And then I'd be moving up for resources as well, just because they'll drop stuff, and I want to make sure I'm getting that. I don't know if it disappears. It feels like sometimes it disappears.
I think
I'm not
does.
clear what the rules are.
No, I'm not either. And it's a bummer too, because I've lost treasure and I've lost other things because I've just waited too long. I think it maybe there's some things that stick around forever, but
it feels like things that are placed stick around forever. So if you smash open a jar or something like that, barrel or whatever, those things are going to be there forever, because they are specifically placed, not systemically. And systemically placed, you know, random, you know, loot drop type stuff, they really can't keep around forever, on the GameCube anyway. You know, today of course they could, but at the time I think it would have been a stretch, or at least not the way we really thought about doing things at the time. I'm sure there were games that did. You know, System Shock 2 did, right? If you put everything, I mean, everything was there all the time, so it was possible. But maybe not. But if you put in the elevator, it was. I guess that was the trick we got in the interview.
Oh yeah, right. But yeah, I mean, I think so. We had the lead up to the castle with the cannon and that kind of stuff, which was kind of fun. I mean, and we're getting a bit more variety of enemies. You have some that shoot crossbows. You have some that have shields that you have to break if you want to get to them. And you have sort of these high priest fellows,
flails, guys with
flails.
Do a lot of damage if they get near. Yeah, and the high priests that are seem to tend to be more often a higher breed of hybrid as well, right? And there was even a section with a couple with rocket launchers. Which was yikes. That was scary.
So they're mixing it up in that regard. And then you meet in the prison area this blind character with these big, really long Wolverine claws on. And you know, there's a cool little bell sort of situation when you can distract him, and you got to shoot him in the back because he's infected by the thing, of course. And you know, and I kind of dawn on me because I definitely use flashbangs a fair amount, you know, and it's like, doesn't work on that guy, you know. So so there's you know, they're using their sandbox in interesting ways in some of those ways by you know, their enemy design, comboing that stuff up.
And they're mixing and matching them pretty well too, or changing up the spaces. Like the first time you meet that guy, you're kind of in a big room, and you can use that to your advantage. It's got a central pillar beside, so it's like you can put that between you and him, so you can take a moment to gather what you're going to do next. maybe taking aim at one of the bells or something like that. That's all awesome. Then the second time you meet him, you're in a tiny little box,
Yeah.
and it's a total 180 of like, oh my goodness, this is really hard. And now I'm trying to move into position quickly, right? Which is not something that the game does well, right? Or, I mean, they're intentionally using that against you in that space of like, yeah, you gotta really, you thought you had to stick and move before. Now you really got to stick and move.
When there's guys shooting at you.
Yeah. And so I was taking care of all of them first. But when you'd shoot, of course, the guy would come after you. So it's like you had to really, that was rough. That was a rough room.
Yeah.
I died there just once though. It wasn't too bad.
I think once for me too. Yeah. The main section that I had the most trouble with was the defense in the bathhouse area, where they basically split you up, and of course they're using the AI now, the companion AI, a lot more heavily, because there's no, for instance, there's no dumpsters that she can hide in or anything like that. So you got to like manage her a little bit more, and then there's spaces now where only she can go. So you boost her up and she's cranking, and the get the bridges to come up and stuff, but you have to stay down below. And I lost her a lot of times. I don't know how many times really. It felt like
I ended up shooting her a couple times. I ended up having them get away with her once. Mostly I think I only played that section three times, although it does reset at the beginning of the room, which is like, oof. Oh no, it doesn't. No,
yeah.
I think I died right. Oh, it's it's in the room below where you go with the two plates, pressure plates, gravity plates, or whatever.
Yeah.
Where I died down there and had to do the whole section over again.
Oh wow. Yeah.
That was brutal. And then once you get up to the top of the stairs, that's kind of your new checkpoint. But yeah, so it was this time I gave up the no continues and just was like, I don't have time for no continues. But the that section is pretty tough. It's a management nightmare because they're also coming at you from below. And it's sort of like a final exam, because it's not long after that you lose her for a couple of chapters and it's just you again. And so it feels like both a final exam on sort of dealing with her in terms of protecting her and etc., but also a opportunity to be like, okay, now show us what you've learned, when you don't have to worry about her, and we can make the challenges bigger and weirder. We can put you in a tiny box. If you had to protect her in that tiny box, I mean, forget about it. I mean, that would be a shelf level event for sure. Or the machine gun dude, with the giant turret gun, which took me forever. I didn't have a rifle of any kind, so like
machine gun guy. Who are you talking about?
Who comes out of the center, that pillar in the middle in the gallery?
In the gallery, that's the machine.
And he's got
guy.
Like a Gatling gun.
No, I had some guys come out with rocket launchers on that pedestal.
No, but it's before that. It's before the room with the rocket launchers. It's a red robed priest. Oh, maybe you killed him before he got to it.
I didn't have anybody with a Gatling gun for sure.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. So that in that room, that's a room where you come in and there's two crossbow guys who start shooting you as soon as the door opens.
Yeah.
And you can see up above there's a red robe guy. In fact, he may shout at you or something. And he's got a couple of those robed attendants with the mandibles underneath. And then, so I basically moved into the room and kind of circled around and got down. There's a couple monks to deal with. And then I went through and I think I took out the crossbow guys as well. I went up and got up above. And then I finally ended up going to where that guy was. If he makes it all the way back through to go down below, he goes underneath and comes back into the room in the central pillar with a huge turret, like a turret emplacement in World War II.
Wow.
Where he's like protected, because he's got these, and he can sort of duck behind it as he reloads it, and then he pops up and fires a ton at you. So I'm like trying to, like with a handgun or the TM, I don't even know if I could use the TMP very much. I might not have much left. It's very hard to hit him behind him because he pops up, and I'm not sure what else to do. Like, he's not there's not a lot of time between when he shoots and then the time that he's reloading to get into a position where you have some kind of advantage on him, so you're basically I was trying to shoot him over that, but you could kill him before he got down there. I just wasn't quick enough. He got, he got through, like, and there was a shield guy protecting him or something. And I was like, so
I feel like I shot a barrel up there when you first come in the room and maybe blew him up that way.
Oh yeah. I bet you totally could do that. That's interesting. Yeah. Because he'll blow that up himself. But if you shot that, I bet you could maybe get him that way.
So I got lucky. Lucky there. Yeah. But then at the end, there's another red guy that has the key, I think, right? Where you have to chase him to get the key from him. So you can get out of the.
That's the one I'm talking about. Yeah. I think it's the same guy we're talking about.
Oh, well, I fought him. I chased him at the end.
There are a couple different Red Road guys.
Well, when he was running away, so he runs away with the key around his neck, and I chased him, but instead of chasing him directly, I dropped down and kind of like headed him off at the pass and forced him to go backwards, to go back up.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't really fully think it through. I just did it, so he couldn't go. Maybe he couldn't get to the Gatling gun then.
Yeah,
and I chased him back up to the to the upper level, and then I just took him out that way.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Like, I was doing that section, like, I don't know what to do here, like, because I'm like running low. I was very much running low on bullets, and I still had the red 9. And wow, that's cool. No, it's cool that it played out that way, though. That there's all these different ways to play that. Like, I can imagine if I had a rifle, I might have been able to shoot at him.
Yeah,
before he kind of escaped the room, because he kind of waits for you to chase him a little bit.
He does
as well. Yeah, so I was like, well, I don't have anything I can hit that far reliably, and anyway.
Yeah,
so
I think what I did. So I chased him back up, and he caught on the stairs, and then I threw a flashbang and stunned him, and he was on the stairs, and I just laid into him that way before he could get away.
That's cool. That's cool. And what I love about the systems of the AI and like their sort of pathing and goals and things like that is that there are, and the way that intersects with the level design, it leads to these weird systemically driven stories, right? That they planned for the Gatling gun thing, but you had a very cool interaction to get to that guy. And in fact, you thought that was the way to get him or whatever, like that you were chasing him or something, as opposed to, me getting this other thing, so that's very cool that
I think I thought to myself he was going to get away or something, obviously I didn't know he was going to go to the Gatling gun, but he was running around up top, and then he was going to go downstairs, and I was up top chasing him, and I was like, oh man, I don't want him to get out of the door because maybe it's a fail state or something. And so that's why I dropped down to head him off, and then he got scared essentially and then ran back upstairs.
That's awesome.
That's
really cool. That's really
interesting.
Cool.
Interesting.
Somebody really thought through that, like, and I mean, because they could have closed off that balcony or whatever. They could have found some way to make that not a thing.
Totally. Yeah.
And so they allowed for it.
I think that gallery in general was a pretty good combat space, even for the regular dudes. Because just running around and kind of going, dropping down and then going back up, and I don't know. It's a small space, but still pretty. I thought pretty nice.
They get a lot out of every small space. Like there are rooms where I'll look and I'll save between before and after a room, and I'd be like, I was in there for 45 minutes. Like you talked about last week with the having that so much fun in that one area, with all the town people, and the chainsaw ones. I felt the same way in a lot of the sections here in the hedge maze, which, I guess we'll get to soon, was another one where I just was like, this is really neat. There's not even a ton of enemies. There's a lot of dogs, which, I mean, I don't love killing a bunch of dogs, but that's a Resident Evil staple for sure.
Yeah.
But I did really like how that space was very sort of, like a real hedge maze, just kind of a little lost and like getting turned around and like, I wonder how I would get over to there, and just, constantly kind of thinking, and that just lends to a lot of lot of use for that space, which, is great. I mean, that's wonderful to get that much play, that much fun out of, one room. And I feel like so many of the rooms in this section are that way. So
yeah, they used, I feel like in the hedge maze they had the most jump scares too, that they were able to kind of like have them come out of the bushes, hedges and or just wherever, and so that was also kind of fun, because I feel like most of the time up to this point I've kind of, they telegraph pretty well enemies are coming, because you can usually hear them running or there's chanting or whatever. So you kind of often have a bit of a warning in most cases. Of course, with the sewers with the invisible guys, that was fun sequence.
Mostly the music.
It's honestly, in that case. Yeah, I was just going to say the not that difficult to see them, but I did write down a note about the music specifically in that area. And there's where was the other spot that I wrote down the music? There's another, but I think the music in this section has been very good, and very creepy. Like creepier even, I feel like, than the village. And it's just so unsettling, some of the music that's playing, especially the sewer section. You just like, I do not want to be here. I do not want to be here anymore. Despite it not being too difficult, but really great sequences in the section overall. Let's see.
Well, we should talk about the disposition of a number of characters at this point, because we lost Ashley. We're going to regain her. We run into Ada Wong on the PS4. I actually did the going back and her ziplining away.
Oh, yeah.
Just to see it. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I had done that back in the day. I'd forgotten that was a thing. But so we see her again, and they have kind of a little scuffle, and show that she's really good at what she does, and and he's really good at what he does. Very much I recently watched Tomorrow Never Dies, which is the Michelle Yeoh is in that as a Chinese agent. And they have a similar back and forth between Bond and her, of like, them both being good at things, right? And kind of one up each other in some ways, or, one using the other as a distraction, so that they can get away. And I mean, it's a very sort of similar feeling here with Ada, where you're like, I don't know what she's doing here. Of course, she's the other, fly in the ointment that they're kind of talking about in the letters all the time. Oh, it's another character, there's somebody else here, so it's pretty wild. And we see the end of poor Luis, or Lewis, as they keep calling him. We were talking about in pre-show, just like every time Leon yells Lewis, or like Lewis this, Lewis that, I'm just like, no, so cringeworthy. It's like, please somebody tell him who's voice directing here. Like, please somebody tell him that that's incorrect. But I mean, I assume it is. It should be Luis. Of course.
But
it's spelled that way, right? And
right.
And even if it were Lewis, if you're in Europe, it would be Louis. I mean, the Salazar is very much looks like a French character to me in some ways too, because of the dress and stuff like that. He definitely makes me think like, oh yes, this has Louis Couture's, furniture in here or whatever. Definitely has that feeling to me.
Well, it's I know we have an email about the localization, which I don't know if you want to hit that now or not, but we were talking about Resident Evil 5, right? And their faux pas there, their sort of their tone deafness and controversy that they actually created with the way that they handled going to Africa, I believe. I don't remember what country it was in Africa, but it turns out that's happening here too. Just people weren't as aware of it, I guess, which is like, and then I'm kind of thinking back through like, man, they just, and we already talked about how they're handling Ashley, even just as a character there. So it's like, I don't know, like they need to.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue that we have in games. We'll talk about it in response to that letter. I think we should do it at the end, but Kumail Nanjiani did a bit about Call of Duty and how many millions of dollars were spent developing this thing, and they're in Turkey, or Pakistan in one of them or whatever. I guess it was Pakistan.
Probably both at some point.
Yeah, I mean, at some point. But he was specifically referring, he's like, it's set in my country, and, he's like, it was going to be interesting. And he's like, all the signs are in Arabic. And he's like, we speak Urdu. Like, we don't write in Arabic. Like, you couldn't take the 10 minutes to find out what we speak, or what our street signs are in, like the amount of money you spent. Yeah. It's just, well, I think we'll address that, in the letter, because it asks for some, like, what do you do about that? And we should definitely address that. But yeah, it's noticeable even in the things that we notice, like, so that there's even more there. Which is always the position that you and I are in, specifically as being, cis white men or whatever, that, like, we miss so much, like, because we've never had to think about it, so. So anyway.
Daily education.
For sure.
Should we talk about the Ashley stuff? Surprise. I mean, I guess I had a vague memory of it happening because people would talk about it, but I didn't get this far. I'm way past, not way past, but I'd only scratched the surface on the castle the first time, so I never got to the sequences where you're playing as her. But and when the chapter started, I noticed, the image they have for the chapter showed her with a flashlight by herself, and I was like, I wonder what that does. That mean
that's all about?
Play as her, so that was a nice surprise.
It's also, it kind of, is going the other direction with the final exam, is like, okay, but what if you didn't have all those fancy weapons there? What if you had nothing, effectively, which I think is a really nice sort of touch. And it's a fairly short section. It's only a handful of rooms. It's not overstaying its welcome, but I loved, like, okay, this is an empowerment game way more than our other ones have been. Here's now a section where you're very disempowered, and then using the quick time events for her for dodges, getting out past the knights in armor and everything. All works really, really well.
Well, and some new verbs like crawling under desks, right? And then using lanterns, like the environmental sort of attacks, like using the lanterns and stuff to throw at them. And I
didn't do any of that. I didn't. I just avoided everybody.
Right, which is completely, I'm sure the way to do it. There's lanterns sitting around. It's not in the night section. It's only in the section before that, a few rooms before that. But there's these lanterns sitting on tables, and if you interact with them, then she just throws them at whoever's closest. So you can kill them, all those guys in the room, the monks.
Okay. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's interesting. It's funny. I just ran like heck constantly. I was like, oh man. I felt the disempowerment. I felt it reminds me of a sequence in that David Cage, the one with Jason, press X to Jason. What's that called? It's not Fahrenheit.
No, it's Rain.
Heavy Rain.
Yeah, Heavy Rain. Wow, what a name.
Yeah, there's a section where it turns out to be a dream sequence, but it's very much that, like, you're in a weak position because you're very disempowered. You're this woman in her apartment, and she's just taken a shower, so she's basically unclothed, not fully, but more or less. And you feel it's terrifying, right? I mean, just because you're so weak compared to, like, these armed people coming into your space, you're like, oh my god, like, this is horrendous and horrifying. And it feels very much the same way suddenly playing as Ashley and being like, oh, I have nothing. Like, I have the fact that they don't move that fast is like my one big advantage. So it's like very much pressing the advantage that I had was I move faster, is how it felt to me, which I really liked. Right. It's like, sort of a, you can always do something kind of feeling, it's something I was taught when I was taking Aikido years ago, which was like, the important thing is to do something, when you're attacked or whatever, or when you're in a situation, is not to be passive and let things happen to you. You have to do something. And I like that feeling in this section. So
yeah, and it's I mean another sort of like maybe more sort of subtextual or subtle thing is that you up to this point you've been escorting her and haven't really had too much connection to her, right? There's been some cinematics and stuff where you get some of that very like two-dimensional sort of interactions, but I don't know, there's something about playing as the character. So now I assume when you go back to escorting her, there's this sense of like, oh yeah, she lived through something. She's not just this AI that I'm carrying around. Like, she was captured, she had to find her way to you, she was resourceful, so at least it gives her a little bit something, a little bit of depth there from a gameplay perspective, like, oh yeah, and a story perspective of like, yeah, she actually had to figure things out on her own, which I think is, hopefully will make her a little bit stronger of a character, because she's obviously such a damsel, in such a damsel situation. So, well,
I'm glad you didn't say well-rounded. So,
yeah, oh boy, they would have.
Yeah. Well, and I did. So,
Yeah, well, yeah. At least you didn't say ballistic missiles.
Yeah, very true. I did get that achievement. I was like, yep, he warned me. He warned me this was coming. Yeah. I will say, I actually want to touch on something you mentioned last week, because I paid attention to it more directly this week, which was how she sort of sticks to you. Yeah. It's maybe the last thing I'll talk about, I guess, is that when you're firing, she sticks to you. But what made me think of that as really particularly brilliant, that section or that mechanic, is that the camera also comes in closer. Yeah. So it frames her and you, sort of top third maybe of the body. So you don't have to worry about the legs, and like how this would actually work or anything like that. You don't need to figure any of that stuff out. Yeah. Just by bringing the camera in like that and making it really tight, you can just imagine, like, your brain just does the thing of like, oh, I know what, it just makes sense to me. It just works. And if I had to see how they were actually doing it mechanically, it would be so distracting because it would be wrong, right? And we are pattern matching creatures. We can instantly see when something looks wrong with people, how people walk and things like that. And I was just like, wow, that's really good. Like, because you can normally see him you can see his legs moving, right? And except when he stops to fire, and then it comes in really close. And since she's right there, the fact that he's going to turn and everything, it's so it's perfect.
Good,
really beautiful.
Good little game development gem there. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it reminds me.
Don't avoid doing the hard thing. So
yeah. Well, and you almost don't. It's kind of like you don't need it in a way. Like, you kind of want her to be safe. Yeah. So she's, she's
no. I mean, it solves many problems.
It works well.
But also bringing in the camera also hides any problems. So it's like you're solving problems and hiding other problems at the same time. And it's just, chef's kiss. I'm glad you pointed it out last week, because I specifically went and paid attention to it. So I appreciate you picking up on that. So.
It's interesting as a counter example to that. In Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, the only Metal Gear that had co-op, they have a mechanic where one player can basically stick to the other player in a quote unquote co-op mode, and they basically and then the lead player basically can then. They're basically team stealthing, right? It's like they're following like a train, like they become a centipede of and I think you can play up to 4 players even. So it's like everyone kind of just like,
so it's like a JRPG party, where they all walk in the same path. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're just kind of like, you're snaking through, no pun intended, snaking through through the environment, and the people who have stuck to the lead person don't have to basically, do many inputs, or if any inputs. I think they might just like, so it's like, it's kind of a funny. So you do notice the weirdness in that case.
Yeah. I think a lot of that guy's work is about noticing the weirdness. I think he's very, very free with the fact of his weirdness. So, yeah. All right. Well, unless you have anything else, maybe we should turn to a bit of feedback. We have a few letters this time. We have a couple more after that, and so we'll have some more for next week. But
that sounds good.
Yeah, let's and of course we'll continue to both not tell you what we're playing up to and then forgetting to mention it on Twitter. So even though I'll say that that's what we're going to do, I know now I will forget. So thank you for your patience. And
I just closed the walkthrough down, but maybe we can do the chapter. Just do chapter 4. Do you think it's possible to do the whole chapter? It looks like it's 4 sections again, so 4 subchapters.
Yeah.
So
that seems fine, but we'll give it a go. These emails, of course, were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com, and you, sir, have the first one.
Okay, Resident Evil and its Spanish portrayal from Max. Hello, Brett and Tim.
Yes. This is the one we've been teasing.
Yeah. Long-time listener, first time caller here. First off, I like to say it's been really cool listening to both of you talk about video games with the knowledge only a developer has on the matter. I really like the in-depth discussions you have with each other regarding all the topics you touch on every week. It's really illuminating and inspiring to hear you talk about games in such an eloquent and nuanced way, not only because it's fascinating, but also because it's been really eye-opening for me. Thank you, Max.
Thanks.
Regarding the topic of this email, this is something that might fly above both you guys' heads, since it's related to the Spanish spoken in the game. The game is supposed to be set somewhere in Spain, but the Spanish being spoken is clearly a mix of different Latin American Spanish accents and mostly Mexican slang, and with very few Spanishisms thrown around. I remember at the time of the original release, the Spanish gaming press and community were quite critical of this specific part of the game, particularly because most of the visual aspects regarding Spanish representation were fairly accurate. Also, for those of us like me who natively speak Spanish, was quite jarring, enough to make me kind of want to stop playing because how distracting it was. Although unfortunately at the time in my circle of friends, it was mostly played as a joke. To me, this mostly reads as a localization issue combined with the fact that most likely than not, they assumed that probably any Spanish would work because they all sound foreign, quote unquote. That's just my cynical hypothesis. I'd like to believe we've made some sort of progress since then in matters of portrayals in games. We still have a very long way to go. But I was wondering if you had any insights as to how to approach localization of foreign languages, particularly those like Spanish, with such a variety of cultures, accents, and slangs, and so on. Thank you for the great podcast you do every week. Kind regards, Max from Buenos Aires, Argentina. P.S. Forgive me if I made any grammar and or spelling mistakes. As I mentioned, I'm not a native English speaker. Max, you did wonderfully well. Yes.
More beautifully than apparently the well-funded team behind Resident Evil 4 did. I think it's doubly damning in the sense that, in Japan, which, putting it in context, not to be dismissive at all, but putting it in context, Japanese development tends to be very focused on Japan first, as their primary market, and not even English speaking markets. That's even secondary. So just in terms of how I think they think about what they make, it's very much their focus. And in fact, there was a real crisis in Japanese development, I don't know, like a decade ago or so, when they were having trouble doing the numbers in Japan that they had done before, right? And so they were having a real crisis of confidence and sort of had to change how they did things, I think. So I think to a Japanese speaker, probably, anything vaguely Spanish was perfectly fine. And I think honestly, then they just didn't relocalize any of that stuff. They just kind of got what they could get.
Yeah.
It would be my guess. You know,
Yeah, that's a good point. Because
I'm not trying to excuse that by any means, like, because I think it's atrocious. It's as bad as it is, considering what Max here is saying. And I'm glad somebody wrote in, and I hope people will, in general, write in and clear, especially things like this that we might not have good visibility on, or ears in this case. But so thanks again, Max. You were going to say.
Yeah, no, it's a good point that this is a double localization challenge, right? That they needed to. I mean, I think to sort of Max's question about like dealing with this or handling this better, not dealing with it, but handling it correctly. I mean, and we talked about this just moments ago with 5. They basically dropped the ball twice, and 5 was also bad in various ways. And I mean, and then you think about 1, 2, and 3, which I don't obviously, like I said, I've only played 1, so I don't, and some of 2, but I don't, those are just like in America, right? Those are just, I don't think there's any cultural aspect, like other than American culture, which is like whatever, you bastardize that all you want. We're a bunch of, anyway.
We don't have a culture. We have a Christian,
Yeah, I don't know what we have. We're the worst. I think we're to the point. Well, no, we're not. We're not to the point, but we're getting to the point when we need to get to the point where put the money into it or don't do it. Really,
yeah.
But it's like, okay, you're gonna set your game in Spain. You need to hire people that know about Spain, about the culture. You need that from the beginning.
Yeah,
find a consultant, and you need to set aside. This isn't like, you can't use Google. don't use.
Yeah.
You need to basically you need to invest in the decision you're making. The same way, I don't know, you would invest in the engine that you're making, right? Like, that you're using. It's like, oh, you pay Unreal, whatever, or whatever the engine is you're using, like do the same thing for your consultations and localizations, if you're serious about it, and and that's kind of the place I feel like we need to get to. And they did the same thing with, that, like 5 as a, additionally, bad example of how not to do things. That was easily avoidable. Like they didn't test, they didn't talk to anybody. So it's like, don't touch cultures that you're not willing to invest in doing the right versions of. They could have said it all sorts of other places and been fine.
And the other thing that's worth saying generally is this is why having a more diverse industry and more diverse teams is really important. As Tim was saying, you need to bring those people in. Ideally, they're part of the team, throughout. If, I think something like this would probably be a very narrow kind of consultant kind of role for some period or whatever, to just kind of sanity check everything. I think probably their influences were still American movies, just more broadly speaking, American movies, like the Americas, not the US. So they probably literally were taking Mexican cinema, as some of their influences or what have you, as far as what their Spanish speaking population was, or whatever they were thinking about. Like I can think like early, even early, like Del Toro or something like that,
right. I'm sure their influences,
and other, other references like that. Mexican horror is kind of an interesting film space. So I'm sure it kind of all came from that, but that still is not intended as an excuse. It's just kind of like, I sort of see how it happened. But you want to bring in people with differing perspectives onto teams, as much as you can, especially if you're going to be, dealing with their culture. I mean, we've mentioned others already, earlier with the Urdu, and what have you. So it's just, I don't know, just do the work. just don't be lazy, I guess is what it comes down to.
Do cheap out. Do the work and spend the money, or don't. Don't choose the area that you're not willing to. I mean, one thing that I've been I'm really excited to play it eventually. I'm trying to rewatch some Kurosawa films to prepare for playing Ghost of Tsushima. because they have the Kurosawa mode where you can basically make the game black and white, and it's like playing an older Kurosawa film. And so I'm refreshing my memory, and I'm watching Seven Samurai right now. But and I've done a little bit of reading because I wanted to kind of see how it was received. But that is to flip it around. That's a game about Japan made by an American game development company, right? And I looked up the creative team, and I wanted to kind of see if any of them were Japanese or like sort of how they approached it. So I want to kind of go and like Max said, which is something that we could have easily done, is sort of like to go see what the Spanish press said about this game when it came out, Resident Evil 4. I want to kind of go and read and see how it was received. And I know they actually worked with even the Kurosawa estate for that game. And I think it sounds like that. And obviously they're owned by Sony. So maybe they had the budget and the consultation that necessary to make sure that it was authentic, but it's dealing with a historical era of Japan's history. And so it's, I hope they did due diligence there too, but it sort of, door swings both ways.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm not putting this all on the Japanese at all. It's any team, and like, I get it. I'm sure the people higher up in studios are like, why would we spend money on that and cut it from the line budget, and just say, yeah, we're not going to pay money for that. And you got to push back, and say, look, I mean, we have plenty of examples now, like, hey, look, this is what, RE4 did in Spain because they were so careless, et cetera, and look at all the outcry over RE5 at the time, et cetera, that cost them. And so you can say, look, you can pay for it now, or you can pay for it later, and you'll probably pay more later. So maybe pay for it now.
The other tricky thing that is, was I believe my memory is a bit of the crux of the five RE5's situation. And then I'm thinking about this game because Salazar is his accent sort of a Spanish accent, or is his? I feel like I've heard some people speak with British accents as well, but I'm just kind of I'm misremembering it.
I mean, they're kind of all over the place. I don't think Salazar you could even really say has any. It's so vague. It's messy
and muddy. Yeah, and I feel like with these last two, with 4 and 5 at least, I don't know what they did with 6. I feel like I remember 6 kind of goes all over the planet, but there's this sort of sense of like making the villains, the sense of other that it's sort of like both in 4 and 5 where it's like, oh, and Max mentions it in his email. He puts in quotes, the sound of quote unquote foreign. Right. Like they wanted the Spanish to sound foreign, right. To both Japanese and maybe even, North American ears. And so it sort of has this other quality, which is also kind of a potentially problematic direction to be careful of too, which I think they just didn't. And again, they just kept going further with 5, and then it ended up really blowing up in their face at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks again, Max. It's a good one for us to touch on for sure, and something to always be mindful of as developers.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just do one more because I know we don't have a lot of time before you're streaming. So I'll just take this one and go, which doesn't have a lot of questions. The subject is RE4 is a strategy game? ? Okay, so it has one at the beginning from Steven. Hey guys, Resident Evil 4 was discounted on the Xbox Store, and I've been meaning to revisit it after playing through about 75% of it years ago, so this seemed like the ideal time to follow along with the podcast. I downloaded the game, turned off the lights, and proceeded to give myself an hour-long panic attack. I don't do well with scary games to begin with, and the awkward controls had me feeling so out of control that I was screaming at Leon as if he were a horror movie protagonist. No, stop. Don't go in there. Turn around. God, no, turn around. I died horribly 10 times and didn't even make it past the chainsaw guy. Then I took a lunch break. Upon returning, I decided to take a different approach. I let myself experiment with the movement and enemy AI without worrying about survival, which not only eased up my white knuckle grip on the controller, but offered a totally new perspective. I found myself seeing the village less like a shooter and more like a strategy game. The blocky flow of combat made so much more sense when I realized it was all about give and take decision making. Taking a shot is a deliberate decision. Taking the time to swivel around and retreat is a decision too. Crowd control, height advantage, vaulting over cover, all of those things started to remind me of the recent XCOM games. Now I'm happily gunning and running, as Tim so eloquently put it, roundhouse kicking hordes of villagers in the head with strategic purpose. Thanks as always for your podcast, and I hope to catch up with the recent episodes soon. Steven. P.S. You may wonder how on earth I originally made it through 75% of the game. Well, I was playing with a good friend of mine who happens to be an RE4 expert, so he gets all of the credit. He swears by the TMP and recommends aiming for the legs. Apparently, you can stagger enemies with a single bullet from a mag of 50 and get to the kicking. I have yet to test this theory, but I will report back with my findings. Yes, please do. Yeah, this is, I think I might have alluded to this even in our main conversation, was that I was doing more of this time than in the past as well. Definitely feeling very thoughtful and precise about what I wanted to do, doing more planning, more like looking at the area and saying, okay, where are my avenues? Like, where can I go?
Yeah.
You know, super important. And the XCOM is an interesting, like, obviously that's a lot slower paced, right? Because it's turn-based, but it does have that same sort of feel of like, okay, evaluating spaces. Here you just have to evaluate them a little more quickly, but not super more quickly because most of the enemies are moving pretty slow. So I'm glad you found a way to approach it to let you get through it. The white knuckle horror I recognize from like playing Alien Isolation, but for sure I could see it happening here too, because it can be quite deadly. Like if you're not moving around, you know, if you're kind of taking it as a shooter straight, you know, it's not exactly that. A strategy game is an interesting analogy. Because it's not that. So
no, I think it's a great description, and I kind of wish I would have thought of it myself, but because I do feel like part of it's a better way of saying what he has come upon. I'm blanking on the name. What's his name? Stephen. What Stephen was come upon. Thank you, Stephen. Is a better way of describing what I think been enjoying about some of those sections. And I think in the castle, I would use the that bathhouse section as another example, like the section of well, actually no, I guess the gallery is a little bit better because it's multi-leveled, but that section I talked about last episode with in the village that I love so much, the level design is actually promoting strategy gameplay because of the multi-levels, because the paths sort of circle around each other, because there's like, you know, ways to drop down one way, but you can't go back up the other way unless you get a ladder. And then the AI kind of has its own flow to it. And so I do, though it's not turn-based, I do feel like you're sort of using the level design and the AI, using the level design against the AI in ways that you sort of do in strategy games, you know, where you're kind of like cover or flow, controlling the flow of, you know, bottlenecking enemies. That's literally what I did in that room, in that section I was talking about last time. I bottlenecked them, right? And then I found a way to run
shooting gallery
past them. And I literally knocked, you know, and then you feel like you're clever versus like a, rather than a gun and run, a run and gun, you know, is very hallway based, right? It's very Call of Duty being the most, you know, extreme example of that, where it's all about moving forward, right? You're not really thinking as tactically about the maps, and you know, they're not my favorite kinds of games. I like the tactics, but I wouldn't have thought to bring tactics to this game. But I think the village, even the opening village, right? Because you can go like upstairs and you can move stuff in front of doors, like the cabinets and stuff. You know, that's like strategy stuff. That's cool.
Yeah. I was going to say it's like it's like a very slow moving Doom. I think that's one of the things that makes Doom such a timeless classic. Of course, we talked about it, I don't know, a couple of years ago now. It was when I was in Seattle. And it's a game where you're constantly using the space, like moving up to things, dashing back because you can move kind of so quickly and things like that. It's very much a spatial game. It just plays very fast, and you're making those decisions very, very quickly, constantly. And here, you're making these. They're a little more methodical. They're not all the way to tactical level, but it's like we're on a scale here, on a gradient of sort of speed of strategy, or tactics, I guess would be a more appropriate word. But it's cool. It's a cool observation to think of that. I would not have thought of it in that sort of lineage, but taking that step back, or in that sort of relationship, I guess, with the gameplay is a super fascinating one to think about. So, and it makes me wonder, like, what other nuggets of game design are we missing because we're trained to think of them as one thing when they're really on a spectrum with some other things that maybe seem unconnected at first blush. So anyway, food for thought. So we will call it there. Thank you for the letters, Max and Steven. We have more letters to get to, and we're keeping pretty good pace with them right now. And given how long we're taking on the game, I think we'll get to plenty. Thanks for those again, sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. Of course, we also love to have your reviews on the generally on the Apple infrastructures where we see them. They're a great way for us to find new listeners, or just tell a friend. We don't do any advertising or anything like that, and we'd love to get more listeners so we can get more interesting emails like the ones we had tonight. It's great to be in dialogue with you all. We are on the web at devgameclub.com and on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
And the man himself is going to be streaming again tonight as we record at that same handle at twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end. And you're still in control, I hear.
I'm out of control, but in control. I'm heading to, I think I said last,
the ashtray.
Took a break, but ashtray maze, which I did find it earlier in the game, but like I just left because I didn't understand what was happening. And somebody on the stream, I think, said that I'll be coming back, but I think they're actually asking me to go to is that right? Is it critical path or is it an optional thing?
Mm-hmm. No, it's critical path.
Okay. So I'm now they've asked me to go there. And I'm terrified of what I need to do there. So
it's a cool, there's so many cool sections, but, one of the things this game does a lot is leans into some of the things they experimented with in the final Alan Wake DLC from that game. Yeah, it had a lot of like taking their engine and doing weird geometric experiments, spatial experiments, where it's like, this couldn't exist. Like, it's not realist, right? It's
using games to do game stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, we can just explode out this roadway, so it's like disconnected pieces floating in space or whatever, and do things like that, where the space just becomes a very different sort of thing. It's stuff that other games do, but something like Alan Wake you wouldn't necessarily expect, and certainly the main game doesn't do much like that. So it's interesting.
So
Control seems like they've really taken it to the next level. So
no, I was going to say like in the last level of a game, using the subtractive editor, game design, game development editor to make portals inside other
something like that. Something like that. Yeah,
brilliant. This is brilliant.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Well, maybe not brilliant.
Okay.
Maybe broken. Maybe the tools were just broken, and you just kind of found it by accident. You're like, I didn't know.
That is kind of what happened. I think it was Reed and I. Reed and I were like, wait, I think we could just do this and it would work, right? It's like we're gonna make portals before portals were a thing. Like, okay. Well, I'm gonna do this then.
Yep, there you go. And that's how that level happened. It's level 17 or whatever of
the Indiana Jones.
What is that called?
The Infernal Machine.
Infernal Machine. It's not coming up with it.
Ethereum. Yeah.
Yep. The Ethereum. Oh my goodness.
What a nightmare of a level, but yeah.
Anyway, our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, of course, is by Mark Garcia. Have fun blowing the doors off this week, and good night.
Good night.